My own team left me behind, on purpose. I woke up face down in the mud, bleeding from my shoulder, in the middle of enemy territory. No radio signal, no backup, no one coming. And somewhere far away, my squad was already on a helicopter heading home, with full knowledge of exactly where I was. They didn't make a mistake that night. They made a choice. For months, I told myself it was a miscommunication. That's what you do. You protect your brothers even when they don't deserve it. You make excuses for people who would never make them for you. But the truth has a way of surfacing. And when it finally did, when the real recording played in that hearing room and the whole room went silent, nothing was ever the same again. Not for me. Not for Captain Dodd. And not for a single man who had stood by and said nothing. This is what actually happened, and what I did about it. My name is Rayan. I'm not the kind of man who was born for greatness. I want to be clear about that from the start. I grew up in a small, dusty town where the biggest dream most people had was just stability, a government job, a roof that didn't leak, enough food at the end of the month. My father had served in the army for 22 years. My uncle for 15. The uniform was the most respected thing in our house. More respected than money. More respected than education. I decided early I was going to wear it, but I failed. More than once. My first physical fitness test failed. Came back 3 months later after training every single morning at 5 a.m. Barely passed. Then the entrance exam, failed that too. I sat at a wooden table in our house for 6 months, studying by a single bulb at night while my friends were out living their lives. Third attempt, I passed. When I got the acceptance letter, I didn't shout. I didn't celebrate. I just sat quietly for a moment and said a prayer. Then I went to tell my mother. She cried for 20 minutes. My father shook my hand, and for him, that meant everything. Training was hard in the way that breaks most people. Not physically, mentally. The sleep deprivation, the constant pressure, the feeling that you are always one mistake away from being removed. There were nights I questioned everything. Nights I thought maybe I had been wrong about myself all along. But I had one quality that nobody could train into you and nobody could train out of you. My sergeant spotted it early. He used to say, in front of the whole unit, Rayan doesn't have talent, he has a disease, he just cannot quit. Every man laughed when he said it, I laughed too. But I knew he meant it as a compliment, and I wore it like armor. By my 3rd year, I had earned a place in an elite reconnaissance squad. 6 men, hand-picked. The kind of unit that goes in first and comes out last. I was proud of it in a way I had never been proud of anything. I trusted those men completely. Every single one of them. That trust was the most expensive mistake I ever made. Captain Dowd had been in the army for 20 years before I ever met him. Decorated. Respected. The kind of officer whose name you knew before you ever served under him. He was also the kind of man who had never once been seriously questioned. And men like that, men who go 20 years without being challenged, they develop something dangerous, not confidence. Arrogance dressed as confidence. There's a difference, and it took me too long to see it. The moment that sealed my fate with him happened 8 months before the mission. We were in a post-operation debrief. A routine search had gone wrong. 2 of our support personnel were injured because of a tactical decision Dowd had made that, frankly, didn't hold up when you looked at it clearly. I raised my hand. I spoke calmly. I said, "Sir, with respect, the approach cost us 2 men. I think it's worth reviewing whether the entry timing was right." I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't disrespectful. I was factual. Dowd looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "Noted, Rayan, thank you." The room moved on. I thought it was over. It wasn't even close to over. The mission came 8 months later. 2-day recon run into hostile terrain. 6 men. The objective was simple: map enemy positions along a ridgeline, collect data, return. No engagement, no noise, ghost work. Day 1 went clean. Day 2, hour 6. I was assigned to cover the eastern flank while the rest of the team monitored the ridge from the west. Standard split. I moved into position, set up observation, and began my report. Then my radio crackled once and died. I wasn't panicked. Equipment fails. I switched to backup frequency. Nothing. I waited. I tried 3 more times over the next 20 minutes. Silence. I moved to the pre-designated fallback point, the location every man on that team had memorized for exactly this situation. I arrived, scanned the area, waited in cover. 90 minutes. Nobody came. I told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe they had been compromised. Maybe the mission had shifted. Maybe there was something I didn't know. I gave them every benefit of the doubt a man can give. I found out the truth 3 days later, back at base, when Private Khalil, the youngest man on our team, 22 years old, couldn't lie to save his life, pulled me aside and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. The captain called extraction early. We had your GPS position on the command device. It was active. He saw it. He told us to move. I stared at him. What did the others say? Khalil looked at the floor. Nobody said anything. He never intended me to make it back. That night in the valley, I won't romanticize it. I was not brave. I was terrified in a way that sits in your chest like stone. The kind of fear that makes your hands shake even when you're telling them to be still. I crawled nearly 2 kilometers through open terrain with a torn shoulder, using one arm, stopping every few minutes to listen for movement. I drank rainwater collected in a leaf because I had nothing else. I moved only when I had to. I stayed low. I stayed quiet. I stayed alive by refusing, again and again with every meter, to give up. At dawn, I reached a road, flagged down an army supply convoy. The driver looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Maybe he was. I got back to base by mid-morning. Captain Dowd was one of the first people I saw. He walked toward me, face open, arms slightly wide, relief written all over him. He shook my hand firmly and said, "Rayan, thank God. We were certain we'd lost you." The words were perfect, genuinely perfect. But his eyes were calculating something. I saw it for only a fraction of a second. Then it was gone. I kept my face neutral. I shook his hand. I said, "I made it, sir." And I started watching very carefully from that moment on. Within 6 days, I was pulled from the squad and reassigned to an administrative desk role. The official reason was post-incident psychological assessment. My file was updated with a note, "Psychologically affected by the incident," a phrase that, in military culture, is a quiet death sentence for your reputation. I filed a formal incident report. It was acknowledged. Nothing happened. I requested a review meeting with the unit's senior colonel. The meeting was scheduled twice and cancelled both times without explanation. I submitted a written, detailed account of my experience through the official internal complaints process. 3 weeks later, I was informed that the matter had been reviewed and closed at command level. The document I submitted had simply vanished, as if I had never written it. The worst part was not the injustice. The injustice I could understand. Corrupt systems protect themselves. That's their nature. What I was not prepared for was the silence from the people around me. Men I had trained with for years stopped making eye contact. Not because they hated me, I know that now. Because they were afraid. Afraid of what it meant if I was telling the truth. Afraid of what standing beside me would cost them. And Dodd received a formal commendation for the mission. There was a brief ceremony. I watched from across the base, sitting behind a desk sorting maintenance reports. I want you to understand what that does to a person. When the institution says you are broken, and the people around you act like you are broken, and you are sitting alone in a room day after day with nothing but your own thoughts. A voice starts speaking, quiet at first, then louder. It says, maybe you are wrong, maybe you misread it, maybe you are the problem. There were nights, many of them, where I almost agreed with that voice. 4 months of those nights. 4 months of that desk. 4 months of watching my career rot quietly from the inside while the man who had tried to leave me for dead was celebrated. I came very close to letting it go. Very close. 3 things happened in the same 7-day period. I have thought about the timing many times since, whether it was coincidence or something else. I honestly don't know, but those 7 days changed the entire direction of what happened next. The first thing, Private Khalil was discharged. The stated reason was a minor administrative violation, something trivial, the kind of thing that gets overlooked for most soldiers. Anyone who understood how the army works understood what was actually happening. He had become a risk, a witness who knew too much. They had moved to remove him quietly before he found the courage to speak to anyone outside the unit. When I heard this, something shifted in me. A coldness. Not anger. Something harder than anger. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the people who wronged you are still actively working against you. They hadn't stopped. They had just become more careful. The second thing, I received an anonymous message on my personal phone. No name, no introduction, just a compressed file. I opened it at 2 in the morning, alone in my bunk. It was a set of raw communication logs from the day of the mission, timestamps, frequency records, GPS coordinate data, radio traffic transcripts, including transmissions that had never appeared in the official incident report. Someone inside the system had kept the real records. Someone had decided after 4 months of watching what was happening to me to do something about it. I read every line 3 times. My hands were steady. My mind was completely clear. The third thing, my father called. We had barely spoken that year. I had been keeping him at a distance because I didn't want him to hear the version of me I had become. Quiet, hollowed out, unsure of myself in ways I had never been before. He just asked, very simply, "Rayan, are you okay?" That was all it took. I told him everything. The mission, the desk job, the note in my file, the disappeared documents, the commendation ceremony I had watched from a distance, all of it. I hadn't said it out loud to another human being until that moment, and hearing it in my own voice, hearing how it actually sounded, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "Son, they didn't leave you behind because you were weak. They left you because you were the only honest man in that unit. Honest men make cowards very, very uncomfortable." I didn't sleep that night. I opened my laptop instead. By 5 in the morning, I had begun constructing a 60-page documented account, time-stamped, cross-referenced, incorporating the communication logs, and drawing on statements I had quietly collected from 3 individuals over the previous 4 months who had witnessed different parts of what had happened. I was not going through the unit's internal channels again. That route had been deliberately closed. This time, I submitted directly to the military's Independent Oversight Board, a separate body operating outside the command structure of any individual unit. I also contacted a journalist who covered defense and military accountability. Not to go public, not yet, but to ensure that if my 60-page document disappeared the way my first one had, there would be someone outside the institution who already knew it existed. Then I waited, and this time, the waiting felt different. Because this time, I wasn't waiting to be believed. I was waiting for them to make their next move. 6 weeks after I submitted to the Oversight Board, I received a formal notification that a preliminary inquiry had been opened into the events surrounding the mission. That single sentence, 1 line in a standard notification letter, meant more to me than anything I had received in years. It meant the wall had cracked. Not broken. Not yet. But cracked. I was asked to give formal testimony. I walked into that room with nothing in my hands except a physical copy of the 60 pages and a flash drive with the source files. No visible emotion. No shaking. No anger in my voice. Just the quiet, specific language of someone who has spent 4 months preparing for exactly this moment. The panel asked me 3 separate times, in different phrasings, whether I was certain of my account, whether I was open to the possibility of misremembering or misinterpreting events under stress. 3 times I said yes, I was certain. And then I placed the anonymous communication logs on the table in front of them and told them to compare the timestamps against the official incident report. The room went very quiet, but something else was already happening. Something I hadn't arranged, hadn't planned, hadn't known about until it started. Word had moved through the wider ranks the way real things move in the military, not through announcements but through whispers, through mess hall conversations, through late-night messages between soldiers who had been waiting for someone to go first. 3 other soldiers came forward, different units, different years, different incidents, but the same pattern. Decisions by Captain Dodd that had never made sense. Men who had been quietly removed or reassigned after asking questions. Operations where the official account didn't match what the people on the ground had experienced. I was not the first person this had happened to. I was simply the first one who had stayed, documented everything, and refused to be quiet long enough for the truth to catch up. The psychologically affected notation was formally removed from my file. The desk assignment was ended. I was offered full reinstatement to active field duty, same clearance level, no conditions, no probationary period. I accepted, but I told them I had one thing to attend to first. The formal board hearing was held in a room I will remember for the rest of my life. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a long table with water glasses that nobody touched, senior officers seated along one side. The kind of room where careers end and the institution decides what version of the truth it will carry forward. I was already seated when Captain Dowd walked in. He looked exactly as he always had, composed, decorated, carrying himself with the particular certainty of a man who had never truly been held accountable for anything. 20 years of that walk, 20 years of that expression. He owned every room he walked into, and he expected this one to be no different. Then he saw me. Something shifted in his face. It lasted less than a second, just a brief, involuntary movement around the eyes. Then the composure returned, locked back into place. I didn't look away. I held his gaze until he was the one who broke it. The board chair began reading. The GPS data was presented first, my signal active and visible on the squad's command device at the time of extraction, clearly marking my position at the eastern fallback point. I was not a missing soldier. I was a known, located soldier who had been left. Dowd's legal representative argued field conditions, split-second command decisions, the fog of operational pressure. He was thorough and he was practiced. This was clearly not the first time he had defended decisions that didn't hold up under scrutiny. Then the board chair said, "We'd like to play Exhibit 7. The room was already quiet, but it became a different kind of quiet after that. The recording was raw radio traffic from day 2 of the mission. The audio quality was imperfect, ambient noise, some static, but the voices were unmistakable. Dord's voice, level and clear. "Leave the eastern position. We move now." Then Khalil's voice, younger, slightly hesitant. "Sir, what about Rayan?" A pause. 2, maybe 3 seconds. Then Dodd, calm as a man ordering coffee. He knows what he signed up for. Nobody in that room spoke for a long time. I want to tell you I felt righteous in that moment. I want to tell you it felt like justice, clean and complete. But the truth is more complicated than that. The truth is, I felt something that had no simple name, something heavy and sad and tired. Because the man sitting across that table had once stood in front of my entire unit, pointed at me, and told them I was the kind of soldier the army needed more of. He had believed that once, or at least said it. And then something in him had chosen this instead. Captain Dowd was stripped of his command, formally censured. The full findings were referred to military prosecutors for further proceedings. As the hearing concluded, he stood to leave. His lawyer was already gathering papers. Dowd paused at his chair for a moment, and then he looked at me. Just once. Directly. I had imagined this moment many times over the previous months. In those imagined versions, I always saw anger in his face, resentment, or the cold hatred of a man who had been exposed. What I actually saw was none of those things. He just looked tired. I nodded once, then I turned away. It was done. People ask me how it feels now, whether I feel like I won. I have thought about that question more than any other, and my honest answer is this: I feel like I survived. And surviving is not the same as winning. Winning would mean none of it happened. Winning would mean Khalil still had his career and his dignity. Winning would mean I didn't spend 4 months behind a desk, alone in a room, slowly convincing myself that maybe I was the problem. None of that gets taken back. It happened. It cost things that don't fully return. But I'm still here, still wearing the uniform. And I don't say that lightly. There is one thing I know now that I didn't know before. The most dangerous thing you can be in a corrupt institution is honest. Not aggressive, honest. Because honest people ask questions, and questions are the one thing a rotten system cannot survive. They will label you. They will isolate you. They will use every quiet tool available to make you disappear without a scene. The only answer, the only one that ever works, is to refuse to disappear, not with noise, not with anger, with documentation, with patience, with 1 or 2 people you trust completely, and with a spine that does not bend, no matter how long the pressure lasts or how convincingly the voice in your own head tells you to let it go. My father called me after the hearing. I told him it was finished. He was quiet for a moment, and then he asked me something unexpected. He asked if I regretted any of it. The desk job, the isolation, the months of fighting a system that had every reason to bury me. I thought about it honestly, about the nights that were genuinely dark, about the cost of it, the professional cost, the personal cost, the cost that shows up in small ways you don't notice until much later. Then I told him what my sergeant used to say about me, just changed it slightly. I don't have talent, Dad. I just have a disease. I can't quit. He laughed so hard he had to put the phone down. If you are listening to this, and you are in your own valley right now, if you have been left behind, if the system has turned against you, if the people you trusted have gone silent and you are starting to wonder if maybe they are right about you, I need you to hear this clearly. Nobody may be coming for you. The institution may not protect you. The people who should stand up may stay quiet. The process may fail the first time, and the second time, and possibly the third. None of that means you stop. You document everything. You find one person you can trust. You go above the system if the system won't move. You crawl if you have to. You drink the rain if you have to. But you keep moving. Every single day, you keep moving. They left me behind once. I made sure they never forgot it.